Welcome to Halachot Niddah. This will be part 27 of the class. Today's topic, Rav David Yosef Shlitan Sefer Taharat Habayit is going to speak about a woman delaying her period with pills and many more other halachot that he's going to bring down over here. As a small introduction, we have to remember there is a word that we constantly use, and I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. I do not chas v'shalom want anyone making a mistake. Whenever we say the word be'ona smucha levesta, right, in the period which is closer to her period where she's anticipating to get the period, whenever we see this language be'ona smucha levesta, it is speaking about the time where she's expected to get the period, where she's anticipating to get the period. But not to say that she got the period, because we're going to see, today we're going to learn something that we haven't learned in any other class. We are actually going to allow a guy to have relations with his wife on the day when she's anticipating her period. And we'll see, Rabotai, why and how. We have to make sure that we understand this concept. And the reason why I'm very particular about the language is many times when Talmidei Chachamim or rabbis are teaching halachot, doesn't matter which halachot they're teaching, but in particular halachot niddah, which are dealing with karet, many people, they understand the wrong idea from it. They walk away doing chas v'shalom prohibitions. We don't want that. Okay, Rabotai, so I'm telling you in advance how to be able to understand this word. I don't want chas v'shalom anyone, God forbid, sleeping with their wife when she's actually seeing the period, meaning she's bleeding. That we don't want. Okay, so with that introduction, let's begin today's halakha. Point number one. Isha shemishtameshet bekadurim uterefod dichiyat haveset. If you have a woman who's using pills or other forms of medication to push away her veset, she doesn't want the blood to come. Now the question we're going to want to see, can the husband sleep with her on the day of her expected time of the period, which is be'ona smucha levesta? Can he sleep with her on the day where on any other time of the month, if that was the ona smucha levesta, we would say he's not allowed to sleep with her, correct? Whatever the period might be, day or night. But over here, Rabotai, since she's taking pills to push away her period, comes Rav David Yosef and he tells us, Min adin, according to the letter of the law, ein ba'ala tzarich lefrosh memena be'ona smuch levesta. The husband does not need to separate from her at the ona, which is smucha levesta, meaning at the expected time of the period when she's anticipating the period to come. Now this, Rabotai, is a very big leniency. This over here is a very big leniency, because up to now we've been learning that when it comes to the ona smucha levesta, the husband must always separate, because we are afraid that if he's going to be with her, she might see it. Now comes Rav David Yosef Shlita, and he tells us, but if she's taking kadurim, or terefot, if she's taking pills to push away her period, she doesn't want to get her blood, can the husband sleep with her at the expected time of her period when she's anticipating for the blood to come? So he says here, Min adin ein ba'ala tzarich lefrosh memena, excuse me, be'ona smucha levesta. According to halacha, the husband does not need to separate from his wife at the expected time of the period. Why? So he says, me'achar, since shebazmanenu, in our times, hukach vehuvrar me'al lechol safek, it's proven to us without a doubt, shekadurim uterefot elu, these pills, dochim et haveset, they push away her veset. They push away her period. We know that a woman who's taking pills in order to push away her veset, to push away her period, we know that these pills work. Once we know without any doubt that these pills work, we're going to tell you the husband is allowed to go ahead and have relations with his wife, even be'ona smucha levesta, even at the expected time of the period where she's anticipating for the blood to come. You see that, Rabotai? However, he says, somebody wants to be stringent, Tavala Barakah, may blessings come upon him. Rabotai, I'm going to be careful when I say this. I'm going to be very careful when I say this. One who wants to be stringent, may blessings come upon him. But Rabotai, you have to understand, certain stringencies, if they come at the expense of your wife, that you shouldn't do. If the halakha allows you to do something, don't try to be stringent. Rabotai, I'll give you one example. Let's say Chas v'Shalom right now, your wife turned you on. She did something, it turned you on. And she's the type of lady who's on pills to push away her period. Halachically, you're allowed to be with her. But what do you say? Maybe she's going to get it while I'm having relations with her. So therefore, I'm not going to touch her. So you're being stringent. Now here's the problem. By being stringent, we're afraid now you might spill seminal emission in vain. So there's no reason to be stringent. Or another case. What happens if the wife wants you, she needs to be with you? I don't want to be with. No, I want to be machmir. Why you want to be machmir? If the halakha says it's allowed, why you want to be machmir? So therefore, Rabotai, you have to know, every single person has to know his own scenario, their own case. See if it's okay with your wife. You want to be stringent. I'm not telling you not to be stringent. You want to be stringent, all you want. But make sure that it is fine with your wife. She's not making you go against halakha. All she's doing is, she's telling you, let's do what the halakha says. Let's be together because we're allowed to be together and I want to be with you. If that is the case, and the husband now says, no, I want to be stringent. Rabotai, don't be stringent without first getting the consent of the wife. If she's okay with it, if she says, listen, you want to go to sleep, we'll take it on tomorrow, whatever it might be. Then that you're allowed to do. But otherwise, Rabotai, always be very careful when it comes to being stringent on the expense of your wife. Because of these things, a lot of people, especially the women and also the children, they come to hate religion because you're stringent in places where you shouldn't be. Everything, no, everything's no, right? One is every yes. So again, we see from over here in point number 1, a woman who uses pills in order to push away her period, Min hadin, according to the letter of the law, the husband does not need to separate from her at the expected time of the period to come. You don't have to worry. She's not seeing now. You don't have to worry. Since in our times, it's proven to us without any doubt, these pills, they push away the period. And one who wants to be stringent, may blessings come upon him. But like I said, Rabotai, make sure that is with the consent of your wife. Point number 2. One who wants to take leave, one who wants to go on the way. צריך לפקוד את אשתו בתשמיש קודם שיצא אפילו בעונה סמוך לבסתו. Rabotai, listen to this halacha what Rav David Yosef Shlita is saying. One who wants to take leave, he's going to leave his wife. We're going to see what does it mean, how long you have to be away in order for this halacha to apply. We'll see it later on. But as of now, let's just see what he's saying. One who wants to take leave of his wife, he's going on a trip. We'll see if it's a business trip, if it's a mitzvah trip. We'll see all these halachot. Just give me some time. One who wants to take leave of his wife, and he wants to go away, he wants to travel. Comes the halacha says, tzarich. Needs, Rabotai, you need to. Tzarich lifkod et ishto betashmish. You need to have relations with your wife kodem sheyitze, before you leave the house. Before you leave her to go on your trip, you must have relations with your wife. Here we go. Afilu be'ona hasmucha levesta, even at the expected time of her period. Rabotai, you have to remember, up to now, we were learning that this is asur. Now we are telling you that there is a mitzvah to be with your wife. You see how important, Rabotai, it is to learn halachot? So comes Rav David, he's telling you two things over here. If a person is taking leave of his wife, he's going on a trip, he's flying away, or he's traveling to another state, and he's not coming back, comes Allah, the halacha says, number one, if your wife is clean, meaning on any other given day, and not at the ona, you must make sure you sleep with her. Do not leave the house until you sleep with her. But he says, what happens if that period, that day, is the time when she's anticipating, she's expecting the period to come. It still didn't come, but she's expecting the ona hasmucha levesta. Comes Rav David Yosef and he says, still in that day you have to have relations with her. Even if it's that day you have to have relations. That Rabotai is beautiful. Harotzel said that there one who wants to take leave of his wife, he wants to travel on the way. Tzarich levkod et ishto. He needs to have relations with his wife, betashmis with relations. Kodem sheyitze, before he leaves, afilu ba'ona hasmucha levesta. Even on the ona hasmucha levesta, even at the expected time of her period. Rabotai, look how beautiful Torah is. Why? Why is that? Mishum shenemar beTorah, because it's stated in the Torah in Bereshit Paragim Pasuk Tet Zayin. One of the curses of Chava was after she made Adam Harishon sin. According to one opinion, she was cursed with 10 curses. According to another, she was cursed with 13. He says over here, the verse says, Ve'el isher teshukatech, that you should desire your husband. That's one of the curses that Chava got, that she's going to always want to be with her husband. Milamed comes to teach you, Sheha'isha mishtokeket leba'ala b'shah she'yitza l'derech. Comes to teach you that a woman desires her husband at the time when he's taking leave of her. Since the whole business of separating from your wife at the expected time of the period is only from the rabbis, in a place where there's a mitzvah, the chachamim never made the decree. They're going to tell you you're allowed to do it. When the chachamim tell us that you're not allowed to have a relation with your wife at the ona, at that time when she's anticipating the blood, at that moment you're not allowed to have it, the chachamim said in a regular case. But when there's a mitzvah case, when she's desiring you, and the Torah says that when a husband leaves his wife, she wants to be with him. In reality, what we are afraid of, you have to look into the Shulchan Aruch for this, but I remember learning it. What are we afraid of? Right now, she's desiring her husband. She has the passion to have relations with her husband. Her husband is not going to give it to her, and he's going to leave. What's going to end up happening? Rabotai, what's going to end up happening? Chas v'shalom, when the husband leaves, she can go ahead and she can sleep with a neighbor. We don't want that. We want to make sure that the husband satisfies his wife's needs, and then he can go. Okay? That's what he's telling us over here. וסמכו חכמים על מה שנאמר in איוב פרק ה' פסוק כ"ד, וידעת כי שלום אוהליך ופקדת נבוך לא תחטא. It says, and you will know that your tent is at peace, and you will respect your house, and you will find no sin, meaning you will find nothing wrong. It's a verse that he's bringing down. But what he wants to say over here is like this, וידעת כי שלום אוהליך, that in your house, in your tent is peaceful, ופקדת נבוך, and here when it says, and you visited your residence, which is your wife. The house is called the wife. Make sure that they don't sin. So basically from this verse we are learning that where the Chacham learned that it's a mitzvah to make sure that you are with your wife before you leave. You have to go ahead and make sure you sleep with her. Now, so that was point number 2. So let's just go back over one more time. Let's see this inside. One who wants to take leave of his wife, he wants to travel. He needs to have relations with his wife prior to leaving, even at the expected time of her period. Because it's said in the Torah, Melamed comes to teach you that the wife, she desires her husband at the time when he travels on the road. Since the whole law of not sleeping with your wife at the expected time of the period is only from the rabbis, in the place of a mitzvah, the rabbis never instituted their decree. Okay, now, point number 3. Even our brothers, the Ashkenazim, they're able to be lenient with this halacha according to the letter of the law. But you do have from our brothers, the Ashkenazim, that they are stringent on themselves, that they wouldn't have relations with their wives at the time when they're traveling on the way, at the expected time of the period. Says, may blessings come on them. This that we said on top, that according to the letter of the law, that Ashkenazim are allowed to be with their wives when they're traveling on the road, and before they travel, even if it's the expected time of the period, they're allowed to sleep with their wives. That's according to the letter of the law. But some of them are stringent. So comes Rav David Yosef and he says, so I want you to know, this that you want to be stringent, that's good, only if her visit is an established cycle. Aval, however, he says, but if you have a woman who does not have an established cycle, do not be stringent in this at all. And he has to have relations with her at the time that he decides to travel, even if it's at the expected time of her period. Point number 4. Now we're going to go back, Rabotai, and understanding regarding our situation. Point number 4. Now, before we begin point number 4, up to now we were learning that a person that is taking leave of his wife, he's traveling on the road, he's allowed to go out and he's allowed to have relations with his wife even at the expected time of her period. Comes Rav David Yosef and he tells us now like this, and nevertheless, what happens if she started having the sensations that she's accustomed to have at the time when she's expecting her period to come? He says, for example, her head is heavy on her, her limbs are heavy on her, or she's feeling some type of abdominal pain. She's feeling something is coming. It's known that she's capable of seeing blood right away. These are signs before she sees blood. He says, he doesn't tell you you're not allowed, he just tells you it's proper to be stringent. You shouldn't have relations with her even when you're traveling on the road. Now you have to remember, Rabotai, that every single woman, before she sees her visit, she starts to act in a certain way. She either starts, having abdominal pain, stomach pain, headache. There's certain signs that a woman feels right before her period starts to come. So Rav David Yosef is telling us over here in point number 4, he says, look, if the woman is on the expected time of her period, if she started feeling, let's say, she's feeling a little bit heavy, she's feeling a little bit tired, and these are one of her signs that is going to make her see the period, he says in this situation, if you have to travel, don't sleep with your wife. Not that you're not allowed to. It just says it's proper to be stringent. This measurement of traveling on the road, where we're going to tell you that you're going to need to go ahead and you're going to have to be with your wife, meaning you're going to have to have relations with your wife. You know when we're going to allow you to use this halakha? Who be'oifen, it's in a way, shelo yaspik lachzor lebeito. You're not going to have enough time to come back home. Kishitagia ha'onesh shechayav ba. Where once the period that's eventually going to come where you have to make her happy, when that period is going to come where you are obligated to make her happy, if you're not going to come back by that time, now we're going to tell you that you're allowed to use this halakha. You're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to use this whole halakha. And I'll explain the case. This is what we said over here, one who wants to come out, one who wants to travel, he needs to visit his wife with relations, before he travels. Even if it's at the expected time of a period. You know which guy we're speaking about? Right here, Rabotai, watch this. Who be'ofen, it's in a way, shelo yaspik lachzor lebeito, you're not going to be able to come back home, kishitagia ha'onesh shechayav ba, when the period where you are obligated to make your wife happy, if you're not going to be home by then, now we're going to tell you you're allowed to go out and use this halakha. So let me give you a classical example. Let's say a woman, today was her mikvah night. Say today is January 14, for example. She went to the mikvah, and this woman, every 2 weeks she sees her period. 2 weeks she's pure, 2 weeks she's impure. Let's say on January 14th she went to the mikvah, so therefore on January 28th she's anticipating to get her period. Now the husband has to fly out on January 28th. The halacha says he has to make sure that he satisfies his wife before he flies out. But when is this halacha applicable? Here we go. If let's say the next ona period, the next period where the husband has to make her happy, let's say the mikvah night is going to be, for example, February 15th. If I, as the husband right now, I'm asking, listen, you want to fly out January 28th? I'm fine with that. When are you flying back in? He tells me February 16th. I tell him, therefore you're allowed to use this halakha. He's allowed to use this halakha. But if the husband tells me I'm flying back in on February 15th on the mikvah night, or February 14th, and then he's going to be able to be with her on February 15th, then we're going to tell him he's not allowed to use today's halakha. Guys, you see what I just did? Let me make sure this is clear. When is this halakha applicable? That specifically if the husband leaves now and he's not coming back until after the mikvah night. Again, that's just one example I'm giving you. But what happens to Rabotai? If he's going to come back prior to that, then we're going to tell him he's not allowed to use this halakha. I'll give another example. Because you have to remember that there's certain periods you have to make your wife happy. So let's say a Talmud Chacham. A Talmud Chacham has to make his wife happy. He has an obligation to make her happy at least once a week. And they say it should be on Shabbat, for example. So let's say the husband says, babe, I want to leave, I have to travel out. We'll see for what purposes exactly. But he says, I want to travel out. So you say, when you're leaving? He says, I'm leaving on a Monday. When you're coming back? I'm coming back on a Sunday. Wait a minute. But there's a mitzvah, there's an obligation on you to sleep with me on a Shabbat. You have to give me what I need at least once a week, she tells him. But he says, yeah, what do you want me to do? I have to travel. Whatever it might be, I have to travel. Comes Allah, the halacha says, if that Monday that he's traveling out is the wife's expected time of her period, since he's coming back after Shabbat, means since he's coming back Sunday, which is after the period where the husband's obligated to make her happy, we're going to tell the husband, you must be with your wife. You have to sleep with her and then travel. But what happens if the husband says, babe, I'm leaving Monday, I'll be back Erev Shabbat? No problem. Now he's not allowed to use this halakha. Guys, do you understand how this whole thing is working? I really, really hope that this is clear. So all we're seeing today is like this. This halakha that you are allowed to sleep with your wife at the expected time of her period, that's only specifically when you're traveling out and you're not gonna make it back before the prescribed time when you're gonna have to make her happy again. But if you're gonna come back before the prescribed time when you're gonna have to make her happy, this halakha you're not allowed to use. Okay. So let's just see point number 5 one more time. This measurement of traveling in regards to this matter where you're going to have to go out and you have to be with your wife, you know when we're going to allow you? Who that's in the way, you're not going to be able to come back home. You're not going to have sufficient time to come back home. Where the prescribed time, where you are obligated to make her happy, if you're not going to be here prior to that time, you are allowed to go ahead and use today's halakha in point number 2. Aval, however, excuse me, Aval, however, im kvar kiyem mitzvah ona, what happens if you already did the mitzvah of ona, v'gam yachzor lebeito b'terem tegia ha'ona b'haba'ah, and plus you're going to be able to come home prior to the prescribed time when you're going to have to make her happy again. You should not have relations with her at the expected time of the period before you take leave, before you travel on the road. So let's see that one more time. Aval, however, Im kvar kiyem mitzvot ona. What happens? He already did the mitzvah of the ona. He pleased her. V'gam yachzor lebeito b'terem tagia ha'on haba'ah. And plus he's going to return home prior to the prescribed period where he's going to have to make her happy. Ein lo lapkada b'tashmish be'ona smuch levesta kodem sheyitzeh l'derech. He's not allowed to go ahead and have relations with her at the expected time of her period prior to traveling out. Now, number 5 and number 6 are really they're connected. So now he's going to tell you, now we learned the measurement, how long you have to be away from your wife in order to be able to allow you to go ahead and sleep with her even at the expected time of her period. So we explained that that's as long as you're not coming back before the prescribed time of when you have to please her again. But if you're coming back before the prescribed time, you're not going to be able to use this halakha. Now the halakha is going to speak about this whole time we've been saying in point number 2. One who wants to travel on the road. He wants to travel. He wants to leave. Where is he going? Work? Business? Pleasure? What is he traveling for? So now again, Rabotai, for this also you have another halakha. So that's in point number 6. B'mad devar mamurim, when are we going to allow you to go ahead and use this halakha that you're allowed to sleep with your wife at the expected time of period before you take leave? When is that going to be? K'sheyotze l'derech l'dvar harishut. When you're traveling on the way, because it's optional. Kigon, for example, you're going to sell merchandise, you're going to do business, you're going on a business trip. For sure, if you're taking a vacation, you just want to go travel, you want to have a good time with your boys. In all of these situations, we're going to tell you have to sleep with your wife before you leave. 1 second, I just want to make something clear. So here it goes like this, Rabotai. So let's put the whole halakha together now. If Reuven wants to leave his wife, and we know he's not going to make it back before the prescribed time where he has to go ahead and please her again, we're saying he's allowed to go ahead and he's allowed to sleep with his wife even at the expected time of her period. In which situation, Rabotai, are we speaking about? That specifically if Reuven is going on a business trip, or if he's going on a vacation, he just wants to travel. It's an optional trip. Then we're going to tell him, now you have to go ahead and you have to be with your wife, even if it's the expected time of a period. Aval, however, he says, Im yotzel ledvar mitzvah. Aval, however, im yotzel ledvar mitzvah. What happens right now, if you're taking leave, you're traveling now, not because you want to travel, but because you're going for a mitzvah purpose. Okay, go on, for example, he says, Sheyotze, he's leaving, le'osov mamon le'mitzvah pidyon shavuyim. You're leaving your wife, you're traveling in order to be able to gather money for the mitzvah of redeeming a person who's held in captivity. All the tzedakah, you want to go, or you want to collect money for tzedakah, for charity. All the hachzakat mosotot Torah, or you want to go and you want to uphold Torah institutions. Rabotai, listen what the halacha says. Eino rasha lefkot et ishto b'tashmish be'on asmuch levesta kodem letzeto l'derech. You're not allowed to have a relationship with your wife. So we'll get there, Rabotai. Let me just do something. We have to understand like this. This whole halacha that we allowed you to go out and sleep with your wife at the expected time of a period, when you know you're not going to come back prior to the prescribed time when you're going to have to make her happy again, that's specifically if you're going on an optional trip. Business, you want to sell something, you want to just travel, you want to have a vacation from your wife. That, we're going to tell then the halacha is applicable. But, what happens if you are going for mitzvah purposes? You want to collect money for tzedakah, to redeem a captive. You want to gather money in order to be able to sustain a Torah institution. In all of these situations, anything that's a mitzvah purpose, Eino rashai lefkod et ishto. You're not allowed to visit your wife b'tashmish, with relations, be'ona smuch levesta, at the expected time of a period, kodem tzedeto l'derech, before you travel. That you're not allowed to do, Rabotai. Over there, we're not going to allow you to use this halakha. Why? What happened? Sheyesh lachosh, because we are concerned. Shema yitbatel achar kach ma'asiyat mitzvah al yidei shit'asek b'mitzvah lefkot et ishto. We are afraid. We are concerned. Maybe you're going to nullify the mitzvah. Maybe you're going to nullify afterwards the mitzvah itself, since you were busy doing the mitzvah of making your wife happy. So, because of making your wife happy, there is a chance you might not go out and travel. We're going to tell you now, you're not allowed to go out and use this halakha. So, bottom line, we see, when are you allowed to use this halakha? Only if you are traveling and the travel is optional. But if the travel is mitzvah purposes, you're not allowed to sleep with your wife at the expected time of her period. Now, the reason is because we are afraid by you being busy and doing the mitzvah of making your wife happy, you're going to come and nullify the mitzvah of collecting money for the institution or for the captive or for whatever it might be that you were set out to do. Comes Rav David Yosef and he says in the parentheses, Ve'av shelo be'oned vesta, even when it's not the expected time of her period, and you are traveling right now for mitzvah purposes, Eino tzarich lefkod et ishto b'tashmish k'sheyotze l'derech l'dvar mitzvah. You do not need to visit your wife with relations when you're traveling for the sake of a mitzvah purpose. So we see, Rabotai, number 6. B'mat devar amur. When did we allow you to use this halakha? K'sheyotze l'derech l'dvar harishut. When you're traveling because it's optional. For example, you're going to do business, you want to sell merchandise. And for sure, if you want to just go and just travel, just have a good time, then we're going to tell you allowed to use this halakha. Aval, however, he says, but if you're coming out, if you're traveling for the sake of a mitzvah, for example, if you want to go gather money, you want to collect money for the mitzvah of redeeming a captive, or l'tzedakah, or for tzedakah, or l'achzakat mitzvot Torah, or you want to go out and you want to collect money for Torah institutions, Eino rashai lifkod et ishto b'tashmi b'onas muchlevesta kodem tzitol derech. You do not need to have a relationship with your wife at the expected time of the period prior to traveling to do the mitzvah. Why? We're afraid maybe you're going to nullify afterwards from the doing of the mitzvah. Why? Because you're busy doing the mitzvah of being with your wife. You're going to completely forget to go ahead and do the mitzvah. In the parentheses, even though it's not at the woman's expected time of her period, you do not need to have relations with your wife when you're traveling for the sake of a mitzvah. Point number 7. Even if a person purchased a ticket for travel, it could be a ticket you're traveling on the train, or you had already ordered an Uber, or you had ordered a coach bus, or if you had ordered a plane ticket, doesn't matter. Any way of travel, even if you would have purchased a travel ticket, in a way, that if you're going to nullify your traveling plans, you're going to come to lose money. And there isn't so much of a concern that you're going to cancel the travel plan and the doing of the mitzvah. We're not concerned so much no more. Why? Because there's a monetary loss involved. Nevertheless, Chacham Ovadia says, not Chacham Ovadia, Rav David Yosef Shlita says, if you're traveling on the derech and it's mitzvah purposes, and it's at the expected time of her period, and lo lefkada b'tashish, you're not allowed to have relations with her at that expected time of the period. That's it, Rabotai. This is it. You see this? Every single halacha in detail. And so too, even if you are able to push away the travel 1 day or 2 days, and for sure we know now you're not going to cancel the mitzvah because of that, because you're able to push it away 1 or 2 days. Let's say they give you a grace period. Nevertheless, Rav David Yosef Shlita says, if you're traveling on the road, at the expected time of her period, and it's for mitzvah purposes, and lo lipkada b'tashmish, you should not have relations with your wife. Aval, however, shelo be'onat vesta, if it's not at her expected time of the period, im rachash kartis nisa, if he had purchased a travel ticket, be'oifen, in a way, she'im yibatel nisiato, if he's going to cancel his travel plans, yavol de hefsed mamon, he's going to come to a loss of money. And so too, or if he's able to push away his travel plans 1 or 2 days, and because of that, the mitzvah is not going to be pushed away, it's not going to be cancelled. You need to have relations with your wife before you place your feet on the way, meaning before you leave. So Rav David Yosef is saying something very powerful. If the person is traveling for the sake of a mitzvah, and it's at the expected time of her period, we're not going to allow him to have relations. He should go and do the mitzvah. You might say, Rabbi, 1 second, what happens if there's a loss of money involved? If he cancels the plane ticket, he's going to lose the money, or he's able to push away the travel 1 or 2 days? Doesn't matter. We're still not going to allow you to have relations at the expected time of her period. However, Rav David Yosef Shlita did say, what happens if the husband is traveling for the sake of a mitzvah, but it's not at the expected time of her period, and there is a loss of money involved if he's going to cancel the trip, or if he's able to go ahead and push it away 1 or 2 days, and we know the mitzvah is not going to be cancelled, over there we're going to tell you he needs to go ahead and he has to be with his wife at the time when she's not expecting her period to come. Okay, point number 8. ושליח מוסד תורני המקבל אחוזים מהתרומות שמביא למוסד. What happens if you have a messenger right now that they're sending him from a Torah institution where he's collecting the donations but on a percentage, that he's going to be able to bring it back to the Torah institution? What about this person? He's getting paid for what he's doing. Can he have relations with his wife at the expected time of her period? So he says like this: if you have a messenger from a Torah institution, that accepts a percentage, from the donations, that he's going to eventually bring to the Torah institution, if his whole kavanah is that he's going to get paid a certain percentage, it's not considered to be that he's traveling on the road for the sake of a mitzvah in regards to this halakha. Ulam, however, he says, but what happens if his intention is be'emet? Listen, yeah, he wants to get paid, but at the same time he's doing for the sake of the mitzvah. And for sure, and for sure, if his whole kavanah is for the sake of the mitzvah, even though he's getting paid, it's considered to be that he's traveling for the sake of the mitzvah. So therefore, in this situation, he's not going to be allowed to have relations with his wife at the expected time of the period. Point number 9. What happens if the woman is traveling? She wants to now go ahead and travel out. And her husband is not traveling with her. It is forbidden for the husband to have relations with her at the expected period of her time. Rabotai, I want to go ahead and I want to make this clear. I don't care what she's traveling for. The whole permission is given when the husband travels, not when the wife travels. If you have a woman that is traveling, and the husband is not traveling with her, it is forbidden for the husband to visit his wife with relations at the expected time of the period. Even if it's not the expected time of the period, he's not obligated to have relations with her when she's traveling. Unless unless she starts, beautifying herself in order to be able to find favor in the husband's eyes. Where you are able to understand from her actions that the whole reason why she's doing it, so he can pay attention to her. Then, in any event, you have an obligation. When you see your wife wants to have relations with you over there, automatically you are obligated to go ahead and have relations with her. That specifically, if it's not at the expected time of the period. Point number 10. If you have a man and a woman, they're both traveling on the road. What happens if you're staying by a guest or you're staying by a host where you're not going to be able to do the mitzvah of honor, you're not going to be able to be together with each other? You're not allowed to have relations with your wife at the expected time of the period prior to leaving. Rabotai, you want to go right now to your in-laws. For example, I don't know, you want to go for Pesach, you want to go to your in-laws. Now, in your in-laws, they only have one bedroom. There's no way you're going to have a designated room where you and your wife are going to be able to have relations. Impossible. Too many people there. So what do you say? Let me be with her now. Look, If it's not at the expected time of the period, if it's not be'ona smucha levesta, no problem. It's pashut. Be with her now because you're not going to be able to be with her later. But what happens right now, the day that you're leaving is the expected time of the period. That's the ona smucha levesta. Over there, we're going to tell you, even though you're not going to be able to have relations with her when you're going to be in your in-laws, nevertheless, we're going to tell you you're not allowed to have relations at the expected time of the period. So that's what Rav David Yosef says over here. Ha'ish v'ha'isha, men and women, husband and wife, if they travel on the road together, even if they're going to be in a host place where they're not going to be able to do the mitzvah of ona, they're not going to be able to have relations, he's not allowed to go out and have relations with his wife prior to leaving to the hostess house. Point number 11. Haba min haderech. What happens if a husband came from the way? And he found his wife when she's at the expected time of her period. He flew in today. It is forbidden for him to have relations with her. You are only allowed to go ahead and speak nice words to her. You're allowed to hug her. You're allowed to kiss her. Again, because she still didn't see the period. It is the day when she's expecting to see the period that's allowed. Kissing, hugging, and speaking nicely to one another is allowed. But relations you're not allowed to have. Aval, however, he says, but what happens if you just came from travel, you just flew in, and you find your wife, she's not at the expected time of the period. It's not the onas mukhla vesta. Mitzvah l'pkada b'tashmish. There's a mitzvah to have relations with your wife when you just flew in. Okay, Rabotai. Summary. Point number 1. A woman delaying her period with pills. If a woman takes medication to delay her period, it is considered proven today that these successfully delay the cycle. Therefore, the husband does not need to separate from her at the expected time of the period. Someone who's strict and separates anyway may be blessed, but it is not required. Point number 2. Husband traveling near his wife's expected period. Before traveling, a man should be with his wife, fulfill marital relations, even if it is close to the time she usually sees her period. Reason? She strongly desires him when he leaves. Since the law to separate near the expected period is rabbinic, in this case the sages did not apply the restriction. This leniency applies also to Ashkenazim, though some are strict, and that is praiseworthy. If she does not have a fixed cycle, this is again only for Ashkenazim, do not be strict. He should be with her before travel. Number 3, when not to be lenient. If she already feels typical pre-period symptoms such as heavy head or limbs, abdominal cramping, intestinal pressure, then it is proper not to be with her because bleeding may start immediately. Point number 4. When travel counts for this law, he is only obligated only if he will not be home at the next scheduled time for relations, like we explained at length. However, if he already fulfilled marital relations recently, and he will return before the next scheduled time, he should not be with her close to her expected period before leaving. Point number 5, traveling for mitzvah versus optional trip. If traveling for business, vacation, optional trip, may be with her as above. If traveling for a mitzvah, charity collection, saving captives, supporting Torah, etc., he may not be with her close to the expected period because he may become distracted and fail to complete the mitzvah. Even if tickets were already bought, canceling causes financial loss, still no relations in that case. Point number 6. When the woman is the one traveling, if the wife travels alone, husband may not be with her near expected period. Even not near the period, what happens if it's not at the expected time of the period? He is not obligated to be with her before she leaves. Unless unless she's clearly trying to attract him and desires this, then he should. Point number 7. When both travel together, if both travel together, even if they cannot be together later on the trip, they still may not be together right before leaving if it is near her expected period. Point number 8. Husband returning from travel, if he returns and it is near her expected period, no relations, but affection and closeness are appropriate. If it is not near her expected period, it is a mitzvah to be with her. Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.